Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms.
Where it goes. I was thinking about you a lot in the conversation that we had about grief, because man, grief like just bitch slapped me the other day and unexpectedly, because 15 freaking years ago was I in this fatal car accident that it was really, oh my gosh, the early years were really, really hard. I mean, that plummeted me into the deepest depression of my life. And I'm lucky that I'm still here today. Some days it still amazes me. And thank God, that I've what a blessing that I stepped into the work I do, to help other people break through that. But it's so interesting. I know we've talked about it before too, on as coaches, we've always got to lean in, have coaches ourselves, people to lean on, and to remember that we're human and we're never going to have all of our crap together. And especially being someone that has a focus on grief and helping people through loss and connecting with loved ones. And as a spiritual being and a channel and an intuitive myself, I feel like I'm talking to dead people all the time. And I love it. I love that connection with them.
Yeah.
But what hit me the other day was what is this? It's the significant trauma, and whether it was wrapped around a loss or whatever other traumas you've had in your life, when they sting deep enough, it's that shit goes off like an unset alarm. How crazy, at the exact time and date every year. And in the earlier years, shortly after it happened, it's my mind, my body started this countdown leading up to the day, dreading it. And now I don't do that so much now, as it comes, whatever. But on the day of, I was feeling great the day before. Ironically, it's my daughter's birthday the day before that. Technically on the anniversary, I also celebrate the day I brought my daughter home, which was a huge game changer in my life as far as depression went. And it's a bittersweet day, and I was just so surprised by those damn flashbacks that come back, and they will strike without warning. And no matter all the time, all the healing, all the life that passes until then, I'm in the healthiest, happiest place of my life.
Right.
That grief, that trauma, those triggers, the flashbacks still knock me on my ass.
Yeah.
And
so how do you said that this happens basically yearly, right? Is that what I was saying?
And that's the amazing thing about it. And I mean, at other times too, it used to be a seasonal thing, I noticed.
Sure.
And as time's gone on, it's gotten less and less frequent. And thinking, the more healing that we do and making peace with it. I absolutely have made peace with the situation. It was just interesting, these body triggers, it's so deeply imprinted into my body that damn, it can still strike. And now, I mean, it's gotten easier, because now I know, just let myself sit with it. Perhaps there's still some old grief, some old feelings, emotions around this that in 15 years, perhaps I still haven't tapped into. What else can we let out here? And I found myself trying to still force myself through the motions of working and okay, I'd really like to talk about this. I had no words that day. I posted something the next day where words suddenly came to me wait, wow, now all of this makes sense. And I want to share this because this is so human. No matter where you are in your path, how far you've come from whatever trauma, hey, it's okay for these triggers to still surprise you at times.
Right.
And I think before, as I started on my healing journey, I used to get really hard on myself for letting, still feeling those triggers and thinking, no, my healing needs to stop these.
Yeah, I feel like that's so common.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I felt so called to say something about it, because we've got to let ourselves be human, right? And perhaps maybe the best thing we can do is accept that this grief may never go away. Can I be okay with that? Can I come and face this day and show up fully, whether it kicks me on my ass or not, and let myself fully experience this day and take what I need from it? Because every time.
What would be the alternative then if you didn't fully accept it, right?
Right. We
It
just
just makes it
avoid,
worse for you.
stuff it down, right?
Right?
Stuff down those emotions. We've talked about those a number of times. We all know the issues,
No.
right, of doing that, right? Of
Yeah.
stuffing it down, try not to feel it. So then what? It'll bubble up until you explode, off one little thing going wrong, later on. And yeah, what is the alternative to just letting yourself feel it? We can avoid, we can run around it. And maybe it's not even, like a major traumatic event. Perhaps it's just, I know we talked about it before too, like seasonal depression. Does it even have to be seasonal? Can it just, that dark cloud just come and sweep over you and surprise the shit out of you on any given day? That's definitely happens to me still at times.
So question, like, I know you, like we kind of already said, this has happened regularly for you. It comes up and occasionally just knocks you on your ass, right? Do you notice that you have like anticipation anxiety about it? Or did you at one point, or like?
Oh, I definitely did at one point.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. The earlier years, and I'm sure really anyone that's experienced, like a major trauma and loss like that, like the first years, like that first anniversary, and ironically, I was pregnant by that point and about to have a baby. So that definitely distracted me. So maybe even like the second, third years, I noticed like, yeah, like I said, it like starts this countdown. So definitely anticipation anxiety of like, oh no, this dreadful day. And like, there's just a sadness that used to come with that, and just feeling so bad. The person I lost was only 18 and feeling, gosh, the entire family feeling like they were robbed. He was robbed of his adulthood, and, who would he be now? Where would he be now? What would he be doing? All of those questions, are so hard to not want to ask yourself. And like those questions have quieted in my mind over time, and just trusting, I probably talk to him now more than ever through spirit. He's been one of my closest guides in helping me even realize that I could communicate with him and I could help other people communicate. And God bless it. I'm so grateful for it. It's just so interesting how, just even the trauma of the actual event, that can burn in so deeply. And I found myself the other day contemplating more about what that experience was like for the other people in the vehicle.
Sure.
And realizing, I wrote my book, of course, this major event was included in my memoir, The Daisy Diaries. And I've been connecting with a lot of people over, that release, and people just, wow, what, I can't imagine, thank you for sharing the story. How wild. And I shared the book, with the others that were in that car accident. And I just stopped for a minute, like, wow, what a trip that must have been reading it again, experiencing it again, but reading it from my perspective. Because all of us had such a completely different experience. And so I actually found myself going down that avenue the other day, more wondering, what is their trauma like from this? Because I know it's completely different than mine.
Have you had the chance to have a conversation with them about it?
I did. And you know what? That's the beautiful thing, is that I still tried, like, no, I'm getting through this day. It's been so long. I've got all my healing tools. I'm going to keep working and like finish what I need to today. But it kept weighing on me heavier and heavier until I reached out to those people.
Yeah.
Until I reached out to his mom, until I reached out to the others in the car accident and had a real conversation with them. And really, I felt relieved after just sending them the message to let them know I was thinking about them, that this day is still hard, no matter how far I've come. And that, I hope that, they've all gotten the book and they've been able to read that and see my healing journey and see how much, our loved one has influenced and helped me heal since then. And I just pray, that he's showing up in your life and helping you heal too. And just making that connection with those people, that I know share that same, like unwanted triggers, from that day. Just having that connection with them was like exactly what I needed to like kind of drop the heaviness that was building up all day.
Yeah.
And, it may not be the same for everyone. Everybody's trauma is different and who was involved. Maybe it was something that you just experienced on your own. So it's like, well, what can we do, to help ourselves relieve some of that burden when we're feeling it?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any example. And I know, I mean, you just recently, lost your grandmother too, and like just lost alone can be such a heavy subject, when you're just missing and longing for that person. But
right. I am lucky to have not ever really experienced a trauma like you have, at least to that extent in any area of my life. So I sometimes feel very unqualified to dive in that deeply because I haven't been there, I haven't experienced that depth of, trauma. So I have had other traumas in my life, but not quite to that extent. So I always feel a little inadequate, but I'm always willing to go there if people are willing to go there. Right. But I mean, kind of just the way I interpret it is more like, everybody has their own traumas to varying degrees, and it doesn't really matter what the event is. It's how your brain decides to respond to it. Right.
Exactly. And we always have that conscious choice, and I'm glad that you made that point too, that everybody has experienced some kind of trauma, because a natural reaction is kind of somewhat similar to what you just said of like feeling unqualified because I haven't experienced anything that extreme.
Yeah.
But you know what? Yeah, being thrown out of a vehicle and nearly dying myself. Yes, that was very traumatizing, very physically traumatizing. And that was what was so fascinating about the other day of like, I still wake up on that morning and can picture, that scene of like waking up on the ground and not having any idea where the hell I was.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. But what I've found over the years of healing and doing this inner work and coming to discover myself and feeling so called to help other people is that all trauma is valid.
Yeah.
And you know what? Ironically, the most traumatizing trauma is the stuff that we don't acknowledge as trauma.
Yep.
I found, and I guess perhaps maybe I'm just an example of, to show maybe I went through that physical trauma just to teach myself so that I can show others that a lot of the things that kind of haunted me the longest from that trauma were the beliefs and the little traumas that were already like embedded within me before that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So the guilt, the fear of making mistakes, making the wrong choice, screwing up, I messed up. Those things started much earlier, way into my childhood.
Absolutely.
And those things, it's like, as we do experience these more major traumas, if you will, the lasting things are the things that that you would least expect.
Right.
And those are the things that everyone has experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your case, even if you haven't, been through a major physical trauma, we all carry, these little things. And those are the things that need the most work to really set us free.
Yeah, I was going to say, in my own life and everyone's lives, we can all go back to specific moments. And I can go back to specific moments where I was emotionally, mentally traumatized by various things. And I've done a lot of work to get through them and really see it from a different perspective and observe more so than, try to re-traumatize myself by going through. But I'm able to do that because I've had a lot of support with my mental health journey, and I've had therapists and coaches to talk me through it, and I can't imagine having done it myself. Right. When I was going through some of it, I was lucky to have a therapist right then and there. And I didn't even recognize it as trauma at that moment. But when I was describing it to my therapist, she's like, that was a full-blown trauma response, because it was literally a conversation that I had on the phone with someone, and my vision started to close in. I started to have this panic attack. Like I shut down, like I couldn't even rationally think. And I just was shaking, and I laid down and I had to sleep for 2 hours. And and I didn't recognize that as trauma in that moment, because I was so I had started my spiritual awakening path. So this doesn't happen, right? I can control my mind. Yeah.
Right. And we both laugh tee, yeah.
Right. That's a good one.
Too.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Right. But my therapist luckily I had a call with her like very shortly after that, within a couple of days. She's like, this was trauma. And I was like, oh, like that makes a lot of sense, actually. All right. So now I have a chance to process it this fresh versus like waiting years and years for it to come up in some other circumstance. So I had the luxury of being able to process it almost immediately. So it didn't like stick quite as hard as what it could have done.
Right. And what a blessing, that you were already, seeing a therapist at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can we take a side note here? I actually had started seeing a counselor myself right before that car accident happened, because it was after another trauma that had happened in my life. And God bless it, that I was just starting to open up and get close to her and have this, that support through all of it. I mean, to have someone to lean on and to process these things in the moment. And, God bless it. I mean, if you went through any major traumas and like have been stepping it down and working through it on your own, it's never, ever, ever too late. But especially if you don't feel like you've ever experienced trauma, that does not mean you're not,
right,
qualified to seek help and support.
Yes. I mean, I think everybody should have a therapist.
Everyone. Yes, I agree too. That we should all have someone to be able to lean on, this professional, unbiased opinion to be our sounding board, to help us, like that has the professional skills and knowledge to help you process and work through, emotional trauma. And shit, if we have a hard time even just with the word trauma, if we feel like, oh no, I haven't experienced anything that traumatic, like, no, we all have been mentally, emotionally damaged in some way. I mean, we are human. I mean, look at the world we live in. The capability we have of physically, mentally, emotionally hurting other humans is insane. And the human history of doing that is just mind-blowing.
It's generation after generation after generation.
I was just going to say that generational trauma, even if you in this lifetime have not experienced anything significant that comes to mind right now, I guarantee you all of your ancestors have been piling it on for generations and generations, and you are holding on to their trauma alone.
And I know that if you've got worry and anxiety as part of your life regularly,
you don't know
there's
why.
some trauma in your history that you maybe just have not labeled as trauma. And not that if you don't have those, you don't have the trauma, but like that's a very clear sign to me, like, oh, something in your past has been planted in your head that this is the truth of the world, and it's really, really not.
So any of that, if you're feeling any anxiety, any depression, you don't need, a specific, event in time to validate whether or not it requires or is worthy of seeking any sort of help. If you're feeling that anxiety or depression or any of this constant uneasiness that is making it difficult for you to go through the daily motions of life, you absolutely have every right, no matter what, to seek the help that you deserve and to do it without shame. I think it's getting better in this world. I've noticed it a lot more since the pandemic too. There's a lot more available. I mean, I know you and I are both coaching and on Zoom, right? There's so many options for online, counseling, therapy, support, coaching, all of the things. So there are so many resources out there, and I pray, and it seems that more of the world is tapping into this and, allowing themselves to receive, support and guidance, because shit, this human existence is not easy.
Oh, it sucks.
Oh my gosh. Seriously. But you know what? One thing I love to help people turn around is this concept is to live is to suffer. How many people just deal with it, just deal with their anxiety and their depression, like, oh, this is life. Stress is so normal to the point that like people wear it like a badge. Oh yeah, the more stressed I am, the more I'm like, I don't know, what are we trying to prove? The more I'm showing, like how much I can handle, how much I can take, how strong I am, right? No, it's beating us up and wearing ourselves down. To live is not to suffer. This life should be fun. And that's like what inspired my work, is like once I tapped into that and truly learned how to love myself and to stop beating myself up for the past, to stop letting depression and anxiety just completely bog me down and take my power back.
Yeah.
Holy shit, this life is actually really magical.
Yeah.
It
Now,
is
I have a
actually
question
a
for
lot
you.
of fun. Ooh, yes.
Do you still experience anxiety sometimes?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yep.
I did this morning.
Yeah.
I tell you, I had an internet fiasco. My internet completely went out 10 minutes before a client call, and I have no cell service, nothing. So I went running and booking to go get a hold of this client and make the call work, and it worked. But like, again, any day, there are some days that you just wake up feeling anxious for no reason.
Mhm.
So like that example this morning, okay, like I was in a great mood until that happened. And it's funny how like one little inconvenience can set you off, or maybe it's nothing at all. You just wake up
with the
feeling kind of crappy.
Yeah.
And it just, it's like a dark cloud just floated over your head for no reason. I mean, that happens to me too. And if anything, I've learned to just be with my emotions.
Yeah.
And be
I was gonna
present
say,
with them instead of saying, I don't have time for this. I've got to move on.
You don't have time not to deal with it, right? Like it takes more time in the end of like ruminating on it and worrying about it later. And like the little micro moments of time all add up to a lot more time than if you had just faced it head on right away. But what I was going to say about feeling the anxiety, like anxiety is caused by two different things in the body, right? One that most everybody associates it with is what your brain is thinking, right? And thoughts cause anxiety, but also there is a physiological component that is a very true factor, right? Like we're genetically engineered to feel anxiety for a specific reason, and it's part survival, right? We need to look for the danger in our environment in order to avoid being eaten or killed, right? I talk about this a lot, but there's the mental piece of it is the part where we have real control over it, right? There's a moment where our eyes see something or we hear something, and there's a moment where it goes and filters through that first filter in the brain of, is this an alarm or is it not? And that's it. We got a smoke alarm going off for the toaster, right? But we have a moment of pause in between that first thought that's unconscious, that just is there, and we have a moment to really slip into the prefrontal cortex, into the adult brain, to say like, this is how I want to respond to this. And the more we train that, the more we practice that, the easier it will be to do. And when we've been sitting in our anxious brain and just reacting and reacting and reacting to everything around us, that part of the brain grows. And I talked about this last night in my Cultivating Confidence. I don't even know what the name of my own thing is. But I talked about that as like the more time you spend in the different parts of your brain, the bigger that part will grow. And the more you spend in your reactive brain and just allowing things to make you react instead of pause and respond, the more likely you will be to do that. So it's really taking back control and like, all right, I had this anxious thought. That is something that I can't control. I'm feeling this feeling in my body. And I know that I'm not in physical danger. I know that, whatever is going on around me is like, these are just thoughts in my head, right? My brain is telling me that is a great way to start sometimes, because you have like
it creates that separation too, right? Like what you just said, my brain is having these thoughts. It's like separating yourself from these thoughts. When you feel the monkey mind spinning, right, out of control, recognizing like that's ego talking. The ego that thrives on fear, right, that wants to keep us stuck in that state of anxiety, of that
because it feels safe.
It's survival, right? It's the
useful.
survival tactic. Yes. But to create that space and that little bit of separation of like, oh, I am not these thoughts, and just creating that little bit bigger of a gap each time and just noticing it.
And I am not my anxiety. I am not this anxiety. I am not trauma.
Right. I am not defined by this. Oh my gosh, that's a great thing we could go down to, of any of the trauma that you've had. How many of us, I definitely identified with it for a long time. I blamed myself for a long time. I wasn't even driving, but I blamed myself for all of the series of events that leads up to it. And isn't it interesting how, like, no matter what kind of trauma or someone, especially like the little ones, right? Like the comments perhaps our parents or other people made when we were younger, and we start believing it, like, oh, I'm not smart, or, I'm not good enough at this or that or whatever thing, we start believing that. But remembering, wait, I am not defined by these thoughts, by these comments, by anyone else's judgment. And another thing about anxiety too, I've heard, and I really like this concept because it's definitely rang true for me, is that anxiety typically is, overly anticipating the future, being in this fearful state, right? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And especially if you have experienced significant trauma, that can get embedded really deep, because if you went through something painful, especially shocking, that you weren't expecting, after that, you can be anxious and on guard of what's going to happen next.
And the reason that is because brain wants to try to control as much as possible. And anxiety is 1,000% about control. How can I control everything around me so that I feel this way? Right. And that's like, how do I control, the person who's going to come and have a meeting with me? How do I control, who's going to knock on my door? Right. Like, there's so much that we cannot control. And like, we stop believing that we can handle it. And that's where the fear comes in. And that's where, like, trying to control your spouse, trying to control your kids, trying to control your family, trying to control your friends,
trying to control your internet.
Yep. Trying to control the internet. Yeah. I mean, but that's where the suffering comes in, is when we try to control the things that we literally have no control over. Trying to control the thoughts of other people, not possible. And I don't want my thoughts to be controlled. So stop trying, please. Like, let me have my own thoughts, please. Like,
right. That's a good way to turn it around. But it's so true. Like, the only thing we have control over, you said this already, is our own thoughts, our own reactions to things. And sometimes it seems like we don't even have control of that when it really starts spinning and building momentum. But just noticing,
right?
Just catching, just noticing the anxious thoughts right there pauses it for a moment.
What are you giving your power
separating.
to? Yeah.
And it gives you that moment to maybe just pause, take a breath, and choose. Do I want to keep feeding this fear, this anxiety? Or do I want to choose and take my power back? Again, the anxiety kind of projecting us out into the future, right? We're trying to control the things that are about to happen or going to happen later on in the future. But we have no control over anything but this very present moment.
Yeah, we try to project out and we try to think of every possible scenario that could possibly happen. And 99.9% of those scenarios will never happen. So what if you just trained your brain to let that part go and be okay with, you know what, I'm going to be able to handle it no matter what. And that's not to say like, okay, these are the more likely scenarios, but also you don't need to plan out the whole conversation. If it's a conversation, if it's a confrontational thing, you don't go in with a plan, not a step-by-step detailed, screenplay, right? Here's the outline of what I want to address. We're not going to write, the lighting was blah, 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 dramatic music played, right? That's what our brain wants to do, is know exactly what is going to happen where, and we can't do that. And it drives us crazy. And it gives our power away to the surroundings around us, right? So it's all about who or what are you giving your power to? Are you giving your power to the internet? Do you want your emotional health to be reliant on what the internet is doing? Or what your student with the dumb whatever is doing, I don't want my neighbor with the yappy dog to have power over my emotional health, right? Like, I want that.
Isn't it interesting how quickly we can hand it over to those things? But it all starts with noticing.
Yeah.
Just noticing one thought at a time, and perhaps asking yourself, when we get really anxious, spinning ourselves around the future, can we reel ourselves back into this moment? Am I okay right now? I'm safe right now. I'm sitting in this chair right now. I'm protected. I'm within shelter right now. I'm okay right now. Sometimes we just need to break it down and let it be that simple. I've been talking with a lot of people about that this week, and I say it all the time with my clients too. Like, just take one day at a time. You don't have to worry about tomorrow. oh, that came up with the client this morning too. And just all timing is divine timing. And to not worry about tomorrow, tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yeah.
And sometimes even today seems too overwhelming. Maybe just an hour, this hour, I'm okay. This minute, one breath at a time, even is all we have in this moment. Can we break it down and keep it that simple? And it just takes practice, right?
Yeah,
Keep reeling ourselves back into this moment.
Yeah. And another direction that I often take clients down and myself down is, all right, you're nervous about this thing. What's the worst possible scenario that you can think of that would happen, right? Like, let's just play that out, right? And what happens, or at least it has happened every single time I've done it so far, is they'll tell me exactly what the worst case scenario was, and I ask them what they would do, and they have a plan. Like, oh, okay.
Same here. Every time I've had it done with me, and every time I do the exercise, every time I've done it with the client, immediately. I have never seen anyone even pause for a moment to contemplate what they would do in that worst case. All of them immediately have an answer, like, oh, I guess I do this. I'm like, oh.
All right, so what's the problem then?
Would that be that bad?
I mean, we hope that doesn't happen, but you know what you would do. All right.
It takes that pressure off, right? And then it's suddenly like, oh yeah, what is the issue? But sometimes it just takes that, right? Having someone as a sounding board to just like bounce that off of, to have someone ask you that question.
Yeah.
Because brain doesn't think that. Exactly. And just like calling this out and asking those questions that really, okay, well, if you're that worried about it, what if? What is the worst? And once you face that, it's like, oh, shoot, well then I can handle any outcome if I already have a plan for the worst. And it's just so fun to watch. And I even just like watched it with us too, that reaction of like, oh, well, I would do this. And it's funny how quick that reaction is and how easy people actually have that plan and like realize, oh, and I'm very likely not even going to have to do that.
Yeah.
But man, being able to lean on each other, right? Like that's so important, is to have this connection, someone to talk these things through. Because haven't you noticed a lot of times when our mind is spinning out of control, ego's taking control, and we're spinning down the anxiety path, once we just, get on the phone, get on a call, whatever, to talk it out with someone. And once you start saying some of these things out loud, pouring them out of your head, all of a sudden, gosh, 90% of the time, if not more, do we see, answers just start coming out. Or just suddenly realizing, oh, wow, how many times have we heard or said to others, wow, that seemed a lot worse in my head.
Yep. Most of them, most of the times.
I said 90%. I'm going to say 99% because just talking it out. And if you are looking for someone to talk it out with, my goodness, reach out to either of us anytime. Like all of us need someone to lean on. And if you feel like you don't have a stable person in your life to be able to lean on, or like to talk, to have confidence in, and to share, and be vulnerable with the things that are really worrying you on your mind, there are resources out there. And whether it is finding a therapist or a counselor or working with a coach like Nicole and I.
And both of us have free resources to help. It's not that you need to pay us in order for us to be able to help you, right?
Exactly, because that's not the most important thing here. No, that's not why we're doing the work that we do.
No.
If we were in it for anything just to make money, I probably wouldn't have left engineering to be a coach,
Yeah. Hello.
It's because we're so passionate about helping other people. So please, my God, reach out. And if it's not, like connecting with us, working with us, we can point you in a direction to help you get what you need.
Absolutely.
Because gosh, we both feel so strongly of having, that person, having someone, at least one person, to be able to release those thoughts to talk things out with, to bounce ideas off of, to lean on when you need that support. Because that alone can be so powerful. That can be the difference from having debilitating anxiety to being able to march through life, with confidence and the courage, knowing that.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.